Great. Thank you so much again, Betsy. Maybe for anybody in the audience who actually has never spoken or met you, why don't you give us a quick overview of what is it you cover at Forrester exactly?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm a principal analyst at Forrester Research. I'm on the Future of Work team. It's a very cross-functional and collaborative team, and we get to talk to every single client at Forrester, which is really exceptional and very special for us. And I specifically cover skills intelligence, any of the emerging technologies that have to do with human capital management, talent development, talent management. And because I'm also a trained and certified coach, I also cover coaching as well in the workplace and those practices and strategies and also the technologies that supports it. We tend to have conversations with our clients about of course, technology, because we're Forrester, but more so just about the reality and the experience of the day-to-day and what they're struggling with and how to get through change management and how to get to the other side and how they should define business value, how they should think about stakeholder management. A lot of the very practical and pragmatic implications for a lot of these high-minded changes that we're trying to drive through transformations.
Yeah, this is one of the things I love about conversations we've had in the past. Very practical for audience. So let's dive in. A lot of talk about becoming skills-based organizations. Tell us a little bit, how are companies uncovering skills gaps? Is this once a crisis happens? Is it by mistake? Is there a way to be more intentional and potentially proactive?
It's such a great question because it gets back to a lot of what we've heard too, and Josh said it before, where organizations have always been skill-based. How else are you going to hire someone within your organization? We have always been driving business value based on people's skills. It's just that we have not had a good way of measuring and monitoring and tracking all of those skills and the interplay in the context of how does someone actually bring their best capabilities to work. It's not just the skills they have, it's also their engagement, their level of wellness, the capacity, the time, the energy they have. It's how they operate. It's all of the technical and the kind of soft skills or the human skills, the leadership skills as well that bring that to bear. And typically, of course, we see this as a business challenge. We talk about it with HR and talent acquisition as oh, there's a skills gap, or oh, we have an aging population, therefore we'll have fewer workers in the future. But right now, we are seeing skills gaps come into play as people are trying to actually do their work. So when we survey our leaders across the organization, and I just chose from 3 different surveys, one from AI decision makers, one from data analytics leaders, and one from portfolio marketing. When we asked them what's the biggest barrier to what they were trying to do, one, generative AI adoption, of course, as every leader is trying to do now. The number 1 barrier is lack of technical skills. When you think about moving to new automation technologies, number 1 and number 2 were lack of skills. And for those people taking a picture, I have one more build, so you might want to wait.
So hold.
And number 3, just in terms of execution-wise, right? What's the barrier for portfolio marketing? The number 2 barrier was skills. Actually, number 1 barrier was lack of alignment across different organizations, which of course has skills implications as well as you think about stakeholder management and influence capacity. So skills are a critical business issue, and certainly as I talk to a lot of business leaders, and we all are business leaders as well, but different functions are experiencing this every single day in their work. And so we have to have that intimacy of the business problem and loving the problem and getting to know what our colleagues across different functions are dealing with so that we really understand those skill gaps. I get triggered when I have conversations with leaders and they want feedback about how they're managing skills and they show me something that looks like this. This is a real skills management spreadsheet that a head of enterprise architecture showed to me. He wanted to know what he was missing from the spreadsheet. And I was like, missing? You got a lot going on. I was like, do you actually run your talent strategy based on this? Like, how is that working for you? And of course, it wasn't working. And I said, can I talk to you about a better way? But also, are you having conversations with your HR and your talent leaders to understand what they are seeing and how these two problems can come together in a solution around skills intelligence and managing it more dynamically? So this also triggers me because 13 years ago, when I was doing professional services, I would do a lot of competency mapping for the same thing, building competencies, in breaking it down into skills, and then breaking it down into observable behaviors. And it was a nightmare because you spend 6 weeks doing a project, and then you get a call saying, oh, we went in a different direction for our restructuring. We actually changed all of these new levels, 4 levels to 5 levels. Can you redo it, et cetera? And at the pace of change right now, managing skills like this is just not possible anymore. And so it was definitely very triggering 6 months ago when the head of EA showed me this. And I was like, oh no, it just brought me back to that pain of doing competency modeling and competency mapping.
How do companies typically start their journeys with skill? Is it in one specific area? The more clients you speak to, are you seeing any trends? Is there, more one area than another?
Yeah, it's certainly, as we've heard from various people across different functions here at the conference, I am seeing like very similar trends in terms of just the kinds of use cases that people are taking on with skills. The most common starting places tend to be within talent mobility, talent acquisition, upskilling and reskilling, even gig work, just at its like very kind of nascent. And as Josh Burson said too, like skills used to be primarily a learning conversation, and they were talking about personalized recommendations. We all remember the LXP, Netflix of learning, and all of that, even though that was usually driven by just basic machine learning. Now we're at a place where we can do a lot of more hyper-personalization of learning content, which is great, but these are typically where the use cases start. Then, once you start with those use cases, you realize, oh, there's actually some prerequisites that we need to also solve for so that we can create a better foundation for any other use cases we want to do. And so that's more around the job architecture and making sure that you have a very consistent and more extensible skills language within all of your platforms or all of your systems from a data perspective. We talk about this in terms of the skills graph and even skills normalization, which then can supercharge back to your established use cases. It can make them even better, but then also it can power some of these more expanded use cases where the amount of agility that you can get is even more expansive. And I do have another build coming for those people taking a picture. But when you think about the expanded use cases around workforce planning too, and resource management for sure, like allocating people's work based on their skills, there are some other data components that we need that fill out the talent intelligence picture around the time, the energy, the capacity that people have, the level of engagement or aspiration and interest that they actually want to be doing this work. It's really important and critical to make sure that we are taking a very holistic perspective. And then into kind of the maybe coming soon types of use cases and some of the future use cases that we're starting to see emerging more. One of the things I want to point out on this slide is that the title of that particular section is Composable Now and Packaged Later, right? Because you can build some of this stuff on your own on top of your existing tech infrastructure and ecosystem. There are lots of ways to get to a more skills-driven organization, not just through buying packaged applications. But so I just want to point that out, that like composable is an option, and certainly something that we see a lot of e-commerce and CX teams doing when they think about moving to the next level of their kind of platform infrastructure. But I am really excited about some of these use cases, especially with performance management and compensation, right? Because performance management is the crux of where people are evaluated and assessed for their both job mastery and also potential to move into another job and have more career growth. And so it is really, really important to maybe not think about layering skills on top of your existing practices, but really breaking down and asking, are the practices that we use, especially for performance management, which we know is broken as an industry, this is an opportunity to rethink your process
Evolve
and
it.
your practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given the breadth of use cases, do you sense there's still skepticism to skills-based approaches? And then advice for our audience, how to overcome, you laugh, how to overcome that?
Yeah, it's so funny because in certain corners of LinkedIn, of course, there's a lot of discussion and skepticism and criticism of any of the kind of skills intelligence or skills-based organization type of strategies. And a lot of times it comes from this, maybe a misunderstanding and assumption that skills-based enterprises are all this, right? We're all gonna fractionalize work, we're all going to break down the work to be done, no more jobs, everyone is just people and skills, and that is fine. It might be a future that we move into, absolutely, but you don't have to jump to it. And so a lot of the skepticism I see is kind of misunderstanding the value because they're thinking about the level of change or the level of work that it takes to get there. Agility when it comes to the kind of using skills data, at the root of it is all about how quickly you can determine what skills do you need, the gap analysis against what skills you have. Are you going to buy those skills, build those skills, borrow those skills, and bot those skills? Because we like alliteration. There's a fourth B, of course. But then how are you going to do that? How are you going to recruit for the skills, develop those skills, source those skills, and how do you automate any of those particular skills? This is the value, this is like the holy grail, right? When we get into workforce planning and using skills data and infusing it into our workforce planning structure. But there is a ton of skepticism, as you said, because of the amount of work it takes, right? There are lots of questions that sometimes we have to ask about.
And sometimes you just don't know the answers just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is acknowledging it's okay. It's okay to not have all of these answers, right? What is a skill? What do we call a skill? What are the proficiency levels we want? What signals are we going to use? Whose voice are we going to trust? It is okay that we don't yet know those answers. The point is, you can figure it out. You and your partners internally can figure it out by listening to your workforce, by listening to leaders in your organization, by listening to anyone else in your kind of value network, which we'll definitely talk about. You can figure this out. And yes, it is a transformation, but that's no reason to like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And I think for me, it comes back to this fundamental question of if people really drive your business, which of course they do, especially now that the economy has moved into a services-based and that skills really drives a lot of the intangible value, as of course, SEC came out with that human capital disclosure mandate in 2020. Something else was happening in 2020, so it didn't get a lot of attention and press. But the SEC now wants to see human capital investment disclosures in the kind of 10K and annual report because it matters. And so I think that it really does anchor in that question of if people drive your business, why don't you know more about them? Why don't you know more about their capabilities and their skills and how they feel about their work? It's almost, it's like a question, it's a rhetorical question, right? It's like it doesn't even need answering, but sometimes we do have to give voice to that question because it's something that sometimes is thrown out with some of the skepticism of the hype and reality versus vaporware or all the work that it entails, et cetera. But really we do see that skills, intelligence, and being able to harness it across any of these use cases will deliver a lot of value.
So this slide and the word transformation and the breadth of questions also brings to mind change management. You know, what to expect with regards to, I mean, how much of this is change management? What should we expect? And then just with the word transformation, should we be bringing external consultants to help us with some of this?
Yeah. Well, and the answer, of course, is yes. We need all the help we can get, right? This is not just a relationship between the user organization and the technology provider. It's more than that. It's a community and a network of support that you need. It starts with understanding, like, what kind of business value are you anticipating or that you want to glean from any of these solutions, and what problems are you trying to solve? None of these benefits are guaranteed for any of the skills intelligence vendors. It's all about what you can develop through your value network. And it's about solving problems, real problems that employees are feeling. When we think about what drives engagement, like what are those employee experience levers that drive engagement for people? This number one, I can find new and interesting aspects of my work. Number two, my company provides me an environment where I can be productive. And number three, I feel like I and people like me have the opportunity to learn and grow. That is both a growth and career growth and learning statement. It's also an equity statement. And it has huge implications for a sense of belonging, for people to see that people like me, people who look and act like me, can be successful at my organization. And the only way that we can do that is to break down some of the sometimes relationship-based ways that we use to make talent decisions, like what Jen was saying at Salesforce, into using more data-driven ways of selecting talent, either mobility, talent acquisition, gig work, et cetera. So it really is about kind of grounding in that value, and then from a change perspective, yeah, realizing it is a transformation. It totally is. There's a lot sometimes that needs to change, and you can't do it alone.
And you can't do it all at once.
No, these are things that, like, when you think about your behavioral norms, how talent decisions are usually made, you're going to have to unpack that and untangle it and also figure out how to incentivize the new behaviors that you expect of your managers. No manager is going to want to spend time upskilling and reskilling someone if they're just going to move away from their team to another team, right? So you have to incentivize mobilization. You have to incentivize a manager being a talent mobilizer, not a talent hoarder, right? Because that's usually what managers want to do, because they want to be successful and they want the best, most qualified people on their team. They don't want to give them up. And so you have to think about, like, what is the experience for people and how do you want to help encourage the right behaviors that you expect? It's not just a technology problem. It is absolutely a culture change, people change, and also process change problem. One thing about process, it was so alarming, but it also resonated so much because it made so much sense. Harvard Business School, their leadership studies division, did a survey with 3,000 leaders to try to figure out, like, what was going on with all these digital transformations, right? As everyone's trying to find their new S-curve, and we're in this world of digital sameness, we're all trying to look for this next differentiation moment. And so it's no surprise that 98% of those leaders said, yes, we are going through a digital transformation in this moment. Like, everyone's doing it all the time. It's continuous. Most times it lasts more than 5 years. It's huge. And Louise talked about it yesterday with what Chevron is doing too. It always seems like transformation is like an always on type of job now, because we're always going through a transformation. And yet, in those transformations, the 3 processes that were least changed were how people are recruited, how people's performance is managed, and how people are promoted internally. So you're changing everything about how they experience work and how you're bringing value to customers, and yet you are not changing your people process. You're not changing how you recruit people in this new world. You're not changing about how you manage performance in this new world, and you're not changing how you are managing internal promotions. That was such an eye-opener for me.
Big aha, yeah.
And so it's about decoupling your process from the technology. Do not take your process for granted. And we can talk more about that if you're curious about my thoughts. I am very passionate about that. But it is, I think, one of those critical pieces for fully realizing a successful transformation and the change leadership that's required for it. Because it's not just a change management of like, first we do this, then we do this, and we have a comm strategy and all of our personas, et cetera, et cetera. It's about the leadership perspective of setting a vision and understanding what's in it for them. Like making sure that everyone feels like what you're doing is gonna drive value for them. Because if it doesn't work, they're not gonna come back, and then you don't have adoption.
Yeah. There's gonna be no change in behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot's been said about AI. Where is it commonly being applied today to understand skills?
Yeah, so I'll go back to, in terms of AI detecting and kind of listening to different signals, obviously there's the detection inference that comes from, scraping your resumes, looking at your previous job experiences, extracting skills from that, inferring different skills from that. And then once someone comes into the organization, then you can start to pick up on a lot of signals of who people are working with, what are they working on, what are they talking about, et cetera. This is part of that huge value network of Microsoft as well in terms of Viva. And looking at adjacent skills too, so that you can start to think about new future use cases like learnability and potential. So if I know one set of skills now, what's the likelihood that I'll be able to learn a new set of skills in the future? That is something that we will be able to get to. How can we also understand the plethora of different skills profiles for a particular job, right? So that we can get away from maybe one hiring manager thinking that there's only one critical learning path or career path to one job, but actually understanding, hey, skills profiles look very different across the organization. There are many paths to get to this particular job.
Portfolio of talent profiles.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot that AI can help us with, because obviously managing those skills on a spreadsheet is not going to get us to agility, and it's not going to get us to change. We need something that can help manage the messiness and the complexity and the dynamism of being a human being in the first place. We need something that learns along beside us and gets better as we use it and interact with us. And of course, that is AI. Old AI, in terms of like deterministic AI, is very good at pattern recognition, but now with generative AI, there's so much more in terms of contextual understanding and semantic understanding that it can drive a ton of value when we think about the actual use cases of helping someone be coached through a learning path, or upskilling and reskilling, helping managers deal with difficult conversations, given a difference in your leadership strengths or different profiles. So there's a lot, I think, to come, and it is really exciting.
Yeah, and I was just thinking the underlying issue here is, or I guess some advice here is, get educated on the different types of AIs as well. The impact.
I do, on that point too, I mentioned value network, and this is from Maxie Schmidt's work at Forrester. She's a customer experience analyst, and she talks about this misconception and myth that value is something that is delivered, as in like your technology provider will deliver you value.
It's like a value chain.
Yeah. But it's actually a value network, right? That you are coming into the conversation with your particular goal and business problem that you want to solve, but you're also coming with all of your existing tech infrastructure, all your culture, all your processes, all your ways of understanding, and that's setting the kind of foundation for what you're going to be able to achieve. And then you have a value network around you. It's not just the technology provider, it's all of the people around you that can help you, from both the internal perspective of all of the internal subject matter experts you need to help, especially with AI, right, to bring together a cross-functional consortium and a cross-functional kind of committee to help make decisions and choose different use cases, evaluate the risk mitigation, et cetera, but also externally, right? So all the people that you're leaning on, like industry analysts or the tech provider or the consulting partners, the services firms that you're working with, to help understand what's the best process for this and what's the best practice for this. All of your peers and peer networks, and being able to listen to people who are also going through a very similar situation. All of this decides how much value you're able to reap from whatever solutions you're trying to infuse into your enterprise. So it's not just a kind of one-way take of value from your solution provider. It depends on your ability to leverage your value network.
This is a great picture slide. Okay, and then we got to the final question, which is my favorite. There's a lot has been written in the press about how Gen AI is going to eliminate jobs. Talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are on this topic.
Yeah, this is such a great question, because there is a lot of fear out there, and at least what we have seen, certainly business leaders are saying that AI will change everything, right? The overwhelming majority report that Gen AI specifically, because of its new and also non-deterministic attributes, will change how we do work, from how employees do day-to-day work, how they market and develop competitive advantage, and also just what products and services you bring to market. Like, it's going to change a lot. And if you're not already evaluating use cases for Gen AI, you better start now. You better start yesterday. And so it does bring a lot of change, which, of course, as you said, brings a lot of fear about jobs and how they're going to change. Now, yes, we saw a similar story with automation and how it's going to change jobs. Some jobs will be eliminated, but the majority, 4.5 times, will be changed. 4.5 times jobs will be changed, then will be eliminated. What this means is, of course, for HR, and we have done the analysis on a lot of the HR positions, and between 20 and 30% of your jobs will change because of Gen AI. Your jobs will change, so you'll have to adapt into new ways of working, and then you'll also carry the burden of stewarding job change across the organization. So while you are also dealing with the change coming to your own job, you're expected to also help people understand how their jobs are going to change. And that means new job architectures, new job roles. It means completely overhauling the skills that you need to do those jobs, what tasks are required for different jobs. There's going to be a lot of reshuffling and restructuring of both the work in the job and also the relationship between people in those jobs. And this is a lot to take on. And at once, it is very exciting. There's a lot of change, there's a lot of opportunity coming, but we also need to reckon with the fact that these things are also true, right? Only half of employees feel like they know when to question the results of AI and any other automation tool.
That's scary.
There's a huge gap in both, of course, the career path and overall employee experience, but there's a huge confidence gap right now. There's a lot of ambiguity. And so the workforce itself as a critical persona for making talent intelligence work, because we need them to use the tools to help those tools get better. There's a huge component of just grounding as well in employee experience and making sure people see what's in it for them, and recognizing that it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. You want to make sure that you are always encouraging people to learn new things, find new and interesting aspects of their work, be productive. And so I think it's funny because AI is both a disruptor, but it's also a chance to remind us of what makes us uniquely human. And part of that is hard, especially for HR, because nothing is perfect, and we'll never arrive at a place where things are perfect. There are a lot of people, I think, waiting to jump in or waiting to maybe step into the talent intelligence market or strategy, and they're waiting for something, and I'm not sure what they're waiting for.
Because they're in it.
Yeah. This change is coming whether people like it or not. And so at the end of the day, fundamentally, I do see this as like a mindset shift for people to make sure they are confident in what they know, that they can make the decisions that they need to in this moment, but that perfection doesn't exist, so you can't wait for it. Especially with AI, it will only get better as we use it, and so avoiding using it is not going to help it get better.
I think we're at a point where it's embrace it and get used to the pace of change.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you, Betsy.
Yeah, my pleasure.
As usual, very practical advice. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.